My name is Kara, and at my sister's engagement party, they sat me at the folding table near the coat rack, the one they'd borrowed from the church basement, while 40 guests laughed and clinked glasses 20 feet away. That's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I catered the entire thing. I baked for 3 days straight, 72 hours of herb-crusted salmon bites, handmade phyllo cups, miniature lemon tarts with candied zest. My hands smelled like butter and rosemary for a week. And when the party started, my mother pulled me aside near the kitchen and said quietly, almost tenderly, "You don't mind helping serve, do you? You're so good at this. It would mean the world to your sister." So I served, in my good dress, with a dish towel over my arm. I watched my sister float through the room in a cream-wrapped dress, accepting compliments about the food, accepting them as if she'd touched a single pan. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said actually, that was Kara. She caught my eye once, from across the room, and gave me a small smile, the kind that isn't gratitude. Just acknowledgement that you exist and have been useful. I smiled back. I always did. That was 8 months ago. Tonight is her actual wedding. And I have a folder on my laptop that she doesn't know about. I want to be honest about something before I tell you what happened. I didn't go to that wedding looking for a fight. I'm not that person, or at least I spent most of my life convincing myself I wasn't. I went because I still believed, somewhere in the part of me that refuses to learn, that maybe this time would be different. That maybe when the music played and the flowers were arranged and everyone was in their best clothes, my family would look over and see me. Really see me. Not as the backup plan. Not as the one who handles things. Just as a person who belonged there. I drove 2 hours to get to the venue. I wore a navy dress I'd bought on sale 3 weeks earlier because my mother had called to remind me not to wear anything that would distract from the bridal party. I arrived early. I always arrive early. The venue coordinator found my name on the list after a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Oh, Kara. Yes. You're at table 11. She pointed toward the far side of the room, past the dance floor, near the emergency exit. Not quite a folding table this time, but close. 2 chairs, a narrow round top, a single flickering tea light. No place card. The kind of table you put out when you've almost forgotten someone entirely, but caught yourself at the last minute. I sat down and smoothed my dress and told myself it didn't mean anything. My sister, Danny, was everything at that wedding. She was supposed to be, it was her day. I understood that. But there's a difference between being the bride and erasing everyone else in the room, and Donnie had spent 31 years practicing the second thing. She moved through the cocktail hour like light through glass, bending around people, refracting into whatever they needed her to be. I watched her laugh with our mother's friends, lean into her fiancé's shoulder, pose for photographs with cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't come to table 11. The appetizers came. The server passed my table without stopping, circled back 10 minutes later with a small plate, a few wilted arugula leaves and 2 crackers, with a scrape of something that might have been brie in a former life. Across the room, the main tables were receiving charcuterie boards the size of serving trays, thick with prosciutto and grapes and 3 kinds of cheese. I looked at my crackers for a long moment. Then I took out my phone, not to call anyone, just to have somewhere to look. There was an email from my business partner, Sasha. Client approved the full proposal. They want to move forward with the larger package. You're going to want to see the number they accepted. I locked the screen without reading the figure. This wasn't the place for good news. Good news needed people to share it with. I'd started the business 4 years ago. Kara Ellison Interiors, residential design mostly, some boutique commercial work. It had taken everything I had in the first 2 years. My savings, my weekends, the better part of my social life. My mother had called it a hobby. My father had said, "That's nice." Honey in the tone people use when they've already moved on in their heads. Donnie had posted a story about it on Instagram once, a photo of my business card, with the caption, "So proud of my sister's little side project," and 30 people had liked it before I asked her to take it down. She'd seemed genuinely confused about why that bothered me. I thought about that Instagram post as I sat at table 11 with my 2 crackers. I thought about the phone call my mother had made to my first major client, a couple renovating a Victorian in the East Bay, where she'd mentioned, just in passing, that I was still very new to this and learning as she goes. I'd lost that contract. Found out why 6 months later when the wife mentioned it over coffee. My mother hadn't even told me she'd called them. When I brought it up, she said she'd just been honest. I was protecting them, Kara. They needed someone reliable. I thought about the design awards submission I'd prepared 2 years ago, regional emerging designer, A real credential. The kind that opens doors. I'd worked on that application for 3 weeks. My mother had offered to proofread it. I'd said yes. The submission window had passed, while the draft sat in her inbox unopened. When I asked, she said she'd forgotten. You know how busy things get. You can try again next year. I'd missed the deadline by 4 days. I hadn't tried again. I'd told myself it was because I was too busy. That wasn't the reason. The folder on my laptop had taken me 3 weeks to build. Not because I was planning anything. I want to be clear about that. I had built it because I needed to see it all. In one place. Needed to look at the shape of it without flinching. It had started when Donnie's new publicist emailed me by accident. They'd been trying to reach Donnie's lifestyle contact. The email had a press package attached. I opened it because my name was in the subject line. The package was for a home and lifestyle column Danny had started writing for a regional magazine. It had launched 4 months earlier. I hadn't known about it. The column was called Living with Intention, and it was illustrated, in the premiere issue, with photographs of a dining room I had designed. My photographs. The ones I'd taken for my portfolio. The ones with my color palette, my furniture selections, my custom millwork details. In the caption, styled by Danny Ellison, Park, Danny's last name before the wedding. My last name, Ellison. I closed the email and I sat very still for a long time. Then I opened a folder and started saving things. I saved the press package. I saved the original portfolio photos with their metadata intact. I saved the email chain from 2 years ago, where Danny had asked if she could use a few images just for her personal mood board. Nothing public. I saved the text thread where I'd said yes to the mood board, and nothing else. I saved 2 more issues of the column, each with interiors that looked familiar in the way your own handwriting looks familiar. I saved a voicemail from my mother, left after I'd confronted Danny the first time, telling me that I was being oversensitive and that no one can own an aesthetic, Kara, and that I needed to think about how my attitude was affecting the family. I also saved something else. Something I hadn't been looking for. A text thread that had synced to Danny's iPad, the one she'd left at my apartment for 3 weeks over the summer. The one I'd occasionally used to watch TV, because mine was broken. I hadn't snooped. I want to be clear about that too. I'd been closing out open apps when I saw the name at the top of the thread. It wasn't her fiancé's name. The last message was timestamped the previous Thursday. Miss you? Saturday after the venue tour? And below it, in Danny's font, obviously, don't text this number again until after the 15th. Be patient. The 15th. Today. The wedding day. I had stared at that screen for a very long time. Then I'd taken a screenshot, added it to the folder, and closed the app. I hadn't told anyone. Not Sasha. Not my one friend who knew the whole history with my family. I hadn't decided yet what I was going to do with any of it, if anything. I had driven to this wedding with the folder on my laptop and the laptop in my bag, and no plan at all, because I genuinely did not know who I was going to be by the end of the night. At table 11, a woman I didn't recognize leaned over from the adjacent table and said, "Isn't this the most beautiful wedding?" I said yes. She said, "Are you a friend of the bride?" I said, "I'm her sister." Her face shifted into something warm and surprised. Oh, how wonderful she didn't mention she had a sister. I smiled. She never does. The woman turned back to her table. I picked up one of the crackers and put it back down. My mother found me 40 minutes later. She appeared at table 11 with a flute of champagne she wasn't offering to share, and a smile she'd been wearing so long it had become structural. She sat down across from me, without being invited, which was so perfectly her that I almost laughed. "You look tired," she said. "I drove 2 hours. Danny drove 2 hours too." A pause. She drove from the salon. I didn't respond. She set her champagne down and folded her hands on the table. My mother is a woman who has never once in my memory raised her voice. She doesn't need to. Her precision is extraordinary. She can make a sentence land like a closed door. "I need you to be careful tonight, Kara." Her eyes were very steady. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you've been carrying around in that head of yours, tonight is not the night." "I'm not thinking anything," I said. "I'm eating crackers. You have that face." "I don't have a face." She picked up her champagne. "Your sister is the happiest she's ever been. This is her day. Everything that happens tonight reflects on this family, on all of us." She let that sit for a moment. "I've worked very hard to make sure today is perfect. I need you to support that." She didn't wait for a response. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked back toward the head table, where my father was already refilling his wine glass and laughing too loudly at something the best man had said. I sat with the echo of her words, the happiest she's ever been. I thought about the text thread. Don't text this number until after the 15th. I thought about the dining room photographs in a magazine with someone else's name underneath them. I thought about the contract I'd lost because my mother had told a client I didn't know what I was doing. I thought about 72 hours of cooking at an engagement party where I served the food my sister accepted praise for. I opened my bag. I took out my laptop. I told myself I was just checking the email from Sasha. I wasn't checking the email from Sasha. The room shifted during the toasts. The lights dimmed slightly, the way they do when a venue coordinator hits a preset, and people reached for their glasses and turned toward the microphone near the head table. The best man went first, then the maid of honor, then my father, who told a story about Donnie's childhood that I had no memory of, and that seemed to have been assembled from the emotional highlights of a movie he'd watched recently. People laughed at the right moments. My mother dabbed her eye. Then the MC said there was one more person who wanted to say a few words, and my sister looked pleasantly surprised. The way you look when something is actually a surprise versus the way she usually looked, which was the way you look when you've choreographed your own delight. She looked at me. I was already walking toward the microphone. I want to tell you that I was shaking. That would make this easier to explain. But my hands were completely steady, which scared me more. I took the microphone from the stand and looked out at 40 faces in a dimly lit room, and I didn't try to be funny or warm or sisterly. I just started speaking. I've been thinking about what I wanted to say tonight for a long time. Not just this week, for years, honestly. I've been trying to figure out what I owe the people who raised me, and what I owe myself, and whether those two things can exist in the same room. The room was quiet. The good kind, where people are listening because they can't tell yet what kind of speech this is. My sister is a remarkable person. She always has been. When we were growing up, she was the one people looked at school, at family dinners, at every event we attended together. I was the one who set up the folding chairs. I was the one who stayed late to clean up. I was the one who catered her engagement party and then served the food myself so the caterer she'd hired wouldn't have to make an extra trip. A ripple in the crowd. A few heads turned. I didn't mind. That's what I told myself I didn't mind, because that's what you do for family. I looked at Danny. She was very still, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. 3 weeks ago, I found out that my sister has been publishing a home design column, illustrated with photographs of my work. Using my room designs, my color palettes, my portfolio images, without my permission, without my name, without a single conversation. I kept my voice even. I've been designing professionally for 4 years. My mother once called a potential client of mine to suggest they hire someone more experienced. I lost that contract. My mother's face, in my peripheral vision, it did not change. I submitted for a regional design award 2 years ago. The application deadline passed while my mother held the draft I'd asked her to review. A murmur from somewhere near the center of the room. I've spent 4 years building something real, something that is mine, and I have spent my entire life watching the people at this table find quiet, efficient ways to make sure I stayed small. My father was looking at the tablecloth. My mother was looking at me with an expression that was not anger. Anger would have been easier. It was the face she made when she was calculating. I also want to say something to my sister's fiancé, Marcus. I looked at him directly. He was a solid, steady-looking man who I had met 4 times, and who seemed, genuinely, to love her. I don't know you well enough to know what kind of marriage you're walking into, but I know my sister, and I think you deserve to. I reached into my dress pocket and took out a single folded paper, a printout of the screenshot, the text thread, the message, and the timestamp. I set it on the edge of the head table in front of him. I'm sorry. You shouldn't find out this way. But you also shouldn't find out in 5 years. The room stopped. Not quieted, stopped. Marcus looked down at the paper. He picked it up. His face changed the way a landscape changes right before weather hits slowly, then completely. He looked at Danny. She had set down her champagne glass. I stepped back from the microphone. I didn't announce that I was done. I just stopped speaking. The way you stop doing something you should have stopped long ago. What followed was not the dramatic scene I think people later expected when they heard the story secondhand. Marcus didn't shout. Donnie didn't cry, not yet. What happened was quieter, and somehow worse. Marcus stood up, folded the paper, put it in his jacket pocket, and said to Danny, in a voice low enough that I only caught the shape of it, "I need some air." Then he walked toward the side exit, and his mother, a sharp-faced woman who had watched the whole speech without moving, stood and followed him without a word to anyone. My mother was at my arm within 30 seconds. Her grip was precise. Outside. Now. We stood in the corridor near the coat check, my mother and I, and she was finally not using her careful voice. She was using the other one, the one I had heard maybe 4 times in my life, always in private, always aimed at me. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Yes. You have humiliated this family. You have humiliated your sister on her wedding day. You have destroyed." "I've told the truth," I said. "That's all I did. I told the truth in a room full of people who have been very comfortable with my silence. Your sister needed you. She needed me to serve food at her engagement party and photograph rooms she published under her name and stay quiet while our mother sabotaged my career." I heard my own voice as if from a slight distance, very calm, very flat. I don't think what Donnie needed was the problem. My mother looked at me for a long moment. There was something passing through her expression that I had never seen there before, not quite guilt, not quite fear, but adjacent to both. Then she said quietly, "You always made everything so hard. I made your version of easy impossible," I said. "Those are different things." She went back inside. I stayed in the corridor for a while, leaning against the cool wall, breathing. My phone buzzed. Sasha again. "Why aren't you answering?" "Call me when you can. This is a big deal." I put the phone back in my bag. When I returned to the reception hall, it was reshaping itself the way rooms do after something has broken the original plan. Marcus had not returned. His mother's seat was empty. 3 other guests near the front had quietly gathered their things. The DJ, who had clearly not been briefed, was playing something upbeat and confused sounding. Danny was still at the head table, her posture precise, her face a controlled surface, and I understood in that moment why we were not close. Because we were both, in our own ways, people who did not fall apart in public. Only I had chosen to speak, while she had chosen to perform. My father appeared beside me. He looked older than he had an hour ago, which was something that happened to him in difficult moments. The effort became visible in his face. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You didn't have to do it like that." "I know," I said. "I also didn't have to not do it for 30 years. I chose the thing that still left me standing." He put his hands in his pockets and looked out at the room. "Your mother meant well. She always—" "I know what she meant," I said. "It didn't change what it did." He nodded. "Just once." Then he walked back toward my mother, who was speaking quietly and rapidly to one of the venue coordinators. Her hands folded in front of her, still managing things, still holding the shape of the event together through sheer organizational will. I went back to table 11. I sat down. I finished the second cracker. A woman from one of the center tables, I didn't know her, a friend of Marcus's family, I thought walked over and placed her hand briefly on the table near mine. Not on my hand, just near it. She didn't say anything. She walked back to her table. I don't know why that was the moment that made my eyes sting, but it was. The next 3 weeks were quiet in a way that felt like the absence of a sound I'd been hearing so long I'd stopped noticing it. My mother called twice. The first time, I let it go to voicemail. "Kara, we need to talk about what happened. There are things you don't understand about the choices we made. Call me back." The second time, same message, softer, more tired. I didn't call back, not because I was punishing anyone. I was done with the logic of punishment, but because I genuinely didn't know what I would do with whatever she said. My father mailed me a card. Inside, in his handwriting, "We didn't mean to make you feel invisible. I think we just never thought about what you were feeling at all. I'm not sure which is worse." I put the card in my desk drawer and I thought about it for a long time after. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. It didn't fix anything. It also didn't need to. Danny texted me once, 10 days after the wedding. 2 sentences. "Marcus and I are talking. I don't know yet what that means." Then nothing. I texted back. "I hope it means something good for both of you." That was also true. I didn't need her to be destroyed. I just needed to stop being quietly destroyed myself. The design column was put on pause. I heard through Sasha, who had a friend at the magazine. No announcement, just a gap in the publication schedule. 2 weeks later, Sasha forwarded me an email from the editor. Someone had flagged the image sourcing. They were reviewing the archive. They asked if I would be willing to speak with them. I said yes. I called Sasha back that afternoon, and we talked for 2 hours about the client proposal, and the business, and a potential hire we'd been discussing. And at the end of the call, she said, "You sound different." I asked what she meant. She said, "Lighter. Like something's not sitting on you anymore." I thought about table 11. I thought about the crackers and the coat rack and the 2-hour drive and the folder on my laptop that I had finally, quietly, opened. "Something isn't," I said. I had a meeting with a new client the following Monday. A young couple renovating a bungalow in a neighborhood I loved. The kind of project I'd been wanting to take on for 2 years, but kept putting on hold for reasons that, looking back at them, didn't hold their shape. We spent an hour in the empty rooms talking about light and proportion and what it means to build a space that actually belongs to the people living in it. The wife said, "We just want it to feel like ours." I knew exactly what she meant. Walking out to my car afterward, I called my mother back. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting. She started to speak something about the wedding, about Marcus and Donnie, about the family needing to move forward together, and I let her finish. I'd always let her finish. That part didn't need to change. When she was done, I said, "I'm willing to have a relationship with you. I'm not willing to have the one we had before." She was quiet. I said, "That's not an ultimatum. It's just the truth. I'll let you think about what that means." Then I said goodbye and hung up gently and sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching a sparrow hop along the top of a concrete wall. I didn't feel triumphant. I don't think that's actually what happens when you say something true that's been sitting in your chest for a decade. What happens is simpler, a kind of settling, like furniture finally placed in the right room, like a space that's been rearranged until it makes sense. I opened the email from Sasha and read the number the new client had accepted. It was a good number. I texted back, "Let's schedule a kickoff call. I'm ready."